Welcome to another episode of the Southwest Desert, where today we will explore the fascinating history of the American Southwest through the journeys along its waterways. In this tale, we'll recount the thrilling 1857-58 expedition of the Steamboat explorer up the Colorado River, led by Lieutenant Joseph C. Ives of the U.S. Army Corps of Topographical Engineers. This expedition aimed to determine the navigability of the Colorado River and pave the way for later exploration and development in the region. Our story begins in Philadelphia in 1857, where a unique 56-foot-long iron stern-wheel steamboat called the Explorer was constructed for this special mission. After a test run on the Delaware River, the Explorer was disassembled into 8 sections and began a remarkable journey. Shipped by boat to Panama, carried overland across the isthmus, then by boat again to San Francisco, and finally to the mud flats at the mouth of the Colorado River on the Gulf of California. There, under the direction of Lieutenant Ives, the Explorer was reassembled in December 1857. Thank you for joining your desert frontiersman Alan on another desert journey. Please leave a like or comment. For further Southwest adventures, hit the subscribe button. The Explorer had a few notable features and flaws. In the center of the deck sat a massive boiler which proved too heavy and compromised the steamboat's stability. As a makeshift solution, the crew bolted 4 long wooden beams to the bottom of the hull. This clumsy modification would later cause problems in navigating the Colorado's shallow channels and countless sandbars. Ives was joined by an interesting cast of characters on this expedition. Engineer A.J. Carroll from Philadelphia, physician and geologist Dr. J.S. Newberry, topographer F.W. Egloffstein, a veteran of the 1853 Fremont expedition, P.H. Taylor and C.K. Booker, assistants in charge of astronomical and meteorological observations, and artist and naturalist H.B. Mulhausen. A small detachment of 25 soldiers under Lieutenant Tipton was also meant to provide a military escort, but they traveled overland and didn't catch up to the Explorer until much later. Early on, the Explorer expedition encountered difficulties, beginning with unloading the disassembled steamboat on the tidal mudflats in the Colorado River Delta. With no proper dock, Captain Walsh of the delivery ship Monterey had to maneuver as close to shore as possible during a high tide and deposit the Explorer's pieces directly onto the muddy banks. Ives and his crew then scrambled to build makeshift ways out of driftwood and assemble the steamboat before the next high tide a month later would submerge their worksite. Remarkably, they managed to complete the Explorer's assembly just in time. On December 31, 1857, with steam building in its boiler, the Explorer lifted off with the rising tide and embarked on its groundbreaking mission. The crew made it to Yuma a week later, on January 9th, where they stopped to make final preparations. As the Explorer set off upriver from Yuma, it was greeted by crowds of cheering Yuma Native Americans lining the shores, met with a blast from the steamboat's whistle. Ives noted the Yumas' amusing attempts to adopt Western clothing, with tall, handsome warriors strutting around in ill-fitting hats and ragged jackets. As the Explorer pushed upriver, the crew faced constant challenges from the unseasonably low water levels that winter. Again and again, the steamboat ran aground on the many sandbars in the winding channel, forcing the men to tirelessly bail out and tow the vessel to deeper water. They soon noticed an interesting pattern. Knots of Yuma Native Americans would gather on the banks to watch the Explorer whenever it approached a particularly troublesome sandbar. Engineer Carroll began slowing the engines whenever he spotted this, taking it as a sure sign of navigational troubles ahead. Ives wasn't sure if the tribes intentionally chose vantage points to observe the steamer near the worst spots, and if their villages just happened to be close to the river's most fordable sections. Further upstream, the Explorer entered the territory of the Chemehuevi tribe, who Ives described as sharp-witted. Having less experience with steamboats, the Chemehuevi watched the explorers' arduous progress in a state of amused contempt, demonstrating to Ives' Yuma guides how easily they could travel on foot or pole rafts without any fuss. The Chemehuevi took great delight in the explorers' constant groundings, at first, but their laughter eventually turned to pity, and they began pointing out the shallowest parts of upcoming bars to Captain Robinson. In one humorous anecdote, Ives described an old Chemehuevi woman's outrage when Robinson ignored her well-meaning directions and prudently steered around a sandbar. The woman's charitable intent quickly flipped to fury, and she ran along the bank spewing curses at the captain until the explorer passed out of earshot. Upon reaching the Mojave Valley, Ives was struck by the impressive stature and bearing of the Mojave people. The men, wearing little more than loincloths, had muscular, sometimes gigantic physiques and mostly bright, friendly faces. He noted the Mojave women's looks varied significantly with age, the young ones being quite lovely and slender, while older women tended to be short and stout. Mojave children, nude in the attire they were born in, cheekily mimicked the explorer crewman taking soundings, echoing his calls from the riverbank. Communication often proved difficult, as messages had to be relayed from Ives to his Polish translator Mr. Bielowski in English, then to the Diegueno guide Mariano in rough Spanish, on to the Yuma-speaking Capitan, and finally delivered to the Mojave in their tongue. Ives never knew what transformations his statements underwent, but occasionally noted the perplexed reactions. The Mojave, despite their valley's scant resources, brought provisions of corn and beans to trade. Shrewdly laying out the food and his trade goods, Ives wordlessly assessed the lots, assigned what he felt was fair compensation in beads or cloth, and had his men whisk away the corn and beans, all to the Mojave's surprised delight at this unorthodox but generous manner of commerce. Disaster nearly struck on March 8, 1858, 3.5 months after departing the river mouth, as the explorer entered the treacherous Black Canyon. Ives recorded the near catastrophe in his log. With a stunning crash, the explorer brought up abruptly and instantaneously against a sunken rock. For a second, the impression was that the canyon had fallen in. The concussion was so violent that the men near the bow were thrown overboard. The doctor, Mr. Mulhausen, and myself, having been seated in front of the upper deck, were precipitated head foremost into the bottom of the boat. The fireman, who was pitching a log into the fire, went halfway in with it. The boiler was thrown out of place, the steam pipe doubled up, the wheelhouse torn away. Miraculously, the battered explorer remained afloat, and Captain Robinson managed to tow it to a gravel bank where they could assess the damage. This marked the end of the explorer's upriver voyage, within the future site of Lake Mead, and not far below where Hoover Dam would later be built. While the steamer could go no further, Ives spent 2 more days rowing a skiff upriver as far as the mouth of the Virgin River. He concluded it would not be practical to take the explorer beyond Black Canyon. So, after 68 grueling but historic days on the river, the exploration of the Colorado's navigability came to an end. The stalwart explorer was subsequently sold to Yuma rivermen, but after a few runs hauling wood, it broke free of its moorings and vanished downstream, fading into obscurity for nearly 70 years. It was rediscovered in 1929, the weathered skeleton of its iron hull sunk deep in the silt of the Colorado's forgotten delta channels, a poetic denouement for the mighty little steamboat that once braved uncharted waters. While it's a shame this vessel couldn't be preserved as a monument to southwestern history, the Explorer expedition remains an incredible tale of courage, ingenuity, and cultural exchange. Through Lieutenant Ives' detailed record, we can still marvel at the wild and untamed Colorado River of the 1850s and the resourceful people, Anglo and Native American alike, who wrested secrets from its waters. The explorer and her crew may be long gone, but their spirit of adventure and thirst for knowledge still inspire us to seek out the unknown wonders waiting around the river's bend. Join us next time for more adventures steeped in the lore of the American Southwest. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a like or comment. For further desert romps, hit the subscribe button. Happy trails!